Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on December 1st. Can you believe that? December 1st. This year has flown by 2016. I've been sitting here jotting notes about this news and views. I rarely do that. I only do that on occasions that I want to organize my thoughts a little bit more closely than normal. Normally, I just sort of wing it and comment, but in this instance, I had to write down my thoughts because there's a very strange story. Normally I do these news and views, and I talk about geopolitical issues or financial issues. This one is so strange. I don't know whether it fills those bills or not, but we're going to get to that. So I'm not going to talk about Trump. I'm not going to talk about Pizzagate. I'm not going to talk about foreign nations investigating the Clinton Foundation. And I'm not going to talk about geopolitics, except for a little bit later, I might do that, okay? I want to talk about Antarctica, okay? Because the news coming out of there, folks, if you've been watching Antarctica news, there's not a lot to report, but it seems like in the last 2 months, we have had one story after another, actually the last 6 months, of just very strange stuff going on with Antarctica. So today, I get up ready to do my news and views about foreign nations investigating the Clinton Foundation, and lo and behold, in my email box, I find all these emails about Buzz Aldrin. That's right, Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon on Apollo 11, according to the official story. And no, I'm not an Apollo hoaxer, guys, but, Buzz Aldrin has been medically evacuated from Antarctica. And there's two stories here, and they're very short. I'll just read these to you. One is from Time magazine. The other is from NBC. Let me do the Time magazine. I think this is the Time magazine. First, it says, famed astronaut Buzz Aldrin had to be evacuated from the South Pole for medical reasons, the National Science Foundation said Thursday, and will be taken to nearby New Zealand for treatment. The National Science Foundation, which is providing the airlift, said that a New York Air National Guard plane will transport Aldrin from Antarctica to New Zealand as soon as possible. He appears to have been in Antarctica as a tourist. Okay, yeah, if you believe that one, folks, I have a bridge in Brooklyn for sale. Anyway, in Antarctica as a tourist, posting several photos in advance of his journey to Twitter. All right, and I've posted a photo from these articles in the blog so that you can look at this photo, okay, because that forms a part of my commentary. You've got to look at the photo that Aldrin posted of himself on Twitter. The emergency request for an ailing visitor was made by the Antarctic Company, a South African tourism company, according to the National Science Foundation. The International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators confirmed Aldrin's evacuation, saying he was stable when he was taken from the South Pole to McMurdo Base, that's the American base in Antarctica. Aldrin, 86, as I noted earlier, was the second man to walk on the moon as part of the 1969 Apollo 11 crew. Now, here's NBC's version. I think, again, this is NBC. Reported by Elizabeth Chuck and Jay Blackman. And this article states, quote, American astronaut Buzz Aldrin has been medically evacuated from the South Pole, according to the National Science Foundation and a private tourism group. So they're drumming home, National Science Foundation, private tourist. And I know that Antarctica is a place I really want to see, okay? Aldrin, 86, is in stable condition after his condition deteriorated, and they don't have any explanation here as to why. They just say it deteriorated. Well, deteriorated from what? Supposedly he was healthy. while visiting Antarctica, according to White Desert, which organizes luxury tourism trips to the icy continent. There you go. Take a luxury tour to Antarctica, folks. The group said Aldrin was evacuated on the first available flight out of the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station to the McMurdo Station on the Antarctic coast under the care of a doctor with the U.S. Antarctic Program. He was then flown to Christchurch, New Zealand, and arrived about 4:25 a.m. local time, according to the National Science Foundation, which provided the flight for Aldrin. Doctors with NASA, which tracks the health of astronauts for their entire lives, said that they had been in touch with Aldrin and said he was in good spirits. Earlier in the week, the legendary astronaut posted photos of himself preparing for his trip to Antarctica. And again, that photo, I want to talk about that one of him in front of the airplane. South Pole, here I come, he captioned one photo on Twitter on Tuesday. He was slated to be in the South Pole through December 12th, according to his website. Aldrin became the second man on the moon, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, folks, have you noticed something here? In the last 6 months, we've had the following people now, the following 3 people visiting Antarctica. First of all, we had the Patriarch of Moscow, okay, the Russian Orthodox Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill III, went to Havana, signed his joint declaration with Pope Francis, and then off he goes to Antarctica. And the reason, we are told, is that, well, he was blessing the Orthodox chapel there for all the Russians in Antarctica. Well, here's the thing, folks. Any bishop can do this, all right? Blessing a church is something any bishop can do. You don't need the patriarch down there to do it. So I tend to think that that's a convenient cover story. The Patriarch of Moscow is, of course, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Okay, so he's kind of way up there. Then, a little later, last month, as a matter of fact, in the middle of the biggest, probably most historic election in American history, we had the Secretary of State, John Kerry, also visiting Antarctica in the middle of a diplomatic tour. And, you know, he just decides, according to the State Department, to go down there to Antarctica to check out global warming climate change data, which, of course, he can do from the warmth and comfort of his office at Foggy Bottom in Washington, D.C. So we had John Kerry going, and now we have Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon from Apollo 11, deciding that he wants to take a tour of Antarctica during December, of course, in the middle of the Antarctic summer down there. So you have to wonder here, if you stop and think about this, folks, in addition to this strange list, you have other odd people interested in the southern continent. People like Rudolf Hess and Hermann Goering, who sponsored the 1938-1939 Nazi expedition to the southern continent. Now, Rudolf Hess is kooky, of course, but I kind of raise the eyebrows of suspicion when someone like Hermann Goering is involved. And then we have, of course, Admiral Richard Byrd, who visits Antarctica after the war, and his outfit is, he's outfitted for a several month stay in Antarctica with a battalion of Marines, an entire naval flotilla of warships, and he turns tail and runs after just a few weeks, gives that very strange interview in El Mercurio, from Santiago de Chile, that newspaper, where he says the United States has to prepare itself to fight enemy fighters that can fly from pole to pole with tremendous speed. So we have here an odd list of people that just up and decide they want to visit Antarctica. Okay, at this point, folks, I think there's little doubt here. We're looking at a pattern. Okay. The real question is, what does the pattern possibly mean? Now, I blogged about Secretary of State Ketchup Kerry, as we lovingly like to refer to him here at the Nefarium. I blogged about his visit, and I pointed out that the chief diplomat of the United States on a visit to the southern continent should be taken for what it is. In other words, he doesn't, during a trip, moreover, that was nothing but a diplomatic kind of circuit for the Secretary of State. So in other words, I believed that his purpose may have had something diplomatic about it. And if you look now at Patriarch Kirill III's visit to Antarctica, it's interesting that he is, of course, obviously a religious representative. He's a representative of one of Earth's main historical religions, namely Christianity. And why not the Pope? Well, if you're going to have some sort of religious encounter or representative for an encounter there, then it would be likely to be the Russian Orthodox Patriarch, simply because Russia is one of the few nations with a permanent presence there, and incidentally, a permanent religious presence there in the form of a chapel. So what does all of this add up to? And that's the real question here. And I suspect that if you add all of these data points together, the statements by Admiral Byrd, the Nazi expeditions of the late 1930s, just prior to World War II breaking out, the Secretary of State and his visit, and now Buzz Aldrin, it's looking to me very much like there's a possibility that they might have uncovered something. And the question then becomes, what is it? Well, for those who are familiar with all of the theories about Antarctica having once been a much more, much less polar continent, having slid down there, having at one point been tropical, they have found an interesting bit of evidence to suggest that its position on the surface of the planet may once have been very different. You have, of course, the legend of Atlantis, of continents being buried underwater, which Antarctica certainly would fit the bill. It's buried underwater, quite literally, with all the ice. It strikes me that they may have found something, either something indicative of a lost human and very ancient civilization. In other words, they found Atlantis. Or they might have found something indicating that there is a connection to some sort of very ancient extraterrestrial or interplanetary civilization. I don't know. But if you add all of these visitors together, something is going on down there. And this is bringing me back to my geopolitical comment earlier. If we have the involvement of Nazis, especially people like Hermann Goering, Secretary of State John Kerry, Patriarch of Moscow Kirill III, and now Buzz Aldrin. This looks to me like the kind of, particularly the last three, Kerry, Kirill, and Aldrin. This looks like the sort of entourage or group that you would put together to do one of two things: look over what has been found and take it back and ruminate about it, or it looks like the beginnings of an entourage that you would use to greet somebody in a diplomatic sort of way, or it looks to me like a group is being put together to make some sort of studied analysis and potential revelation of whatever it is that they may have found. But you don't get visitors to Antarctica of this stature unless there's something, I think, very significant going on down there. So I think this is a story to watch in the coming years. I don't know exactly what they're going to say, what they're going to do, if they're going to say or do anything. But the mere fact that you have people of this prominence, and the key here for me really is Patriarch Kirill III and Secretary of State John Kerry, And now we have Buzz Aldrin just deciding he wanted to take a tour. Now notice something. This brings me back to the picture. Because in the picture of the articles, you'll notice that Aldrin is standing, this is from his own tweet, is standing in front of an aircraft with Cyrillic letters, Volga Dnieper. So in other words, he's getting ready to board a Russian aircraft to go down there. And the articles are telling us this is all being arranged by tourist organizations in South Africa and so on. And that may very well be. The Russians may be indeed flying tourists that in there on their airplanes. But the real interesting thing here is that there have been, for a number of years, rumors. This goes back to the period when the Russians were apparently involved in some very, very prominent activity around that subterranean ice-locked lake called Lake Vostok. And then this is years ago, and then suddenly you recall that all news from Antarctica seemed to just drop. It seemed as if an embargo had been placed on news coming out of Antarctica. But it's from this time period that there were rumors to the effect that the Russians and the Americans had established some sort of joint base, and a very secret base in Antarctica. And I find it very interesting that Aldrin, an American astronaut, is being flown to Antarctica on a Russian aircraft. So look at the pattern there as well. We had first the visit of Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, then we had the visit of Secretary of State John Kerry, now we have the visit of Buzz Aldrin flying to Antarctica on a Russian aircraft. So to me, folks, it definitely looks like something is up. Now, I'm not going to be jumping on the ET extraterrestrial disclosure bandwagon here. I saw the same X-Files movie that all of you did, but I don't think that you have to go there. There was, of course, the Clinton administration of the revelation of the Martian meteor with apparently little frozen fossils of microbial life that you'll recall from the 1990s. There is something going on there. It may be interplanetary or extraterrestrial related. It may be related to the discovery of ruins of an ancient human civilization. We simply don't know at this stage. I am inclined toward the former simply because of the presence of Kerry and Kirill in this very, very odd mix of people. But it's all speculation at this point, folks. All that we can say for sure is that it now appears something very, very strange is going on in Antarctica. We don't need Ark of Gabriel stories and all of that stuff that has been out there on the internet about secret discoveries of the Saudis and Patriarch Kirill taking whatever was discovered down to Antarctica and performing rituals over it. We don't need all of that. There is something else going on here, folks. So this is something I think we need to keep our eye on. As for the rest of it that I began, I'm gonna probably be blogging about some of those other issues. I want to thank everybody that have been so kind in sending articles and donations and subscriptions all these years. I didn't do my news and views last week. I was busy with Thanksgiving holiday, but I do want to thank all of you for all the support over these years. I want to wish you all a very happy Christmastide, and we'll see you next week on the flip side. Bye-bye.